I'm Natasha Kirchek, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister is set to meet with Donald Trump next month. Israel adds some of the most advanced jets in the world to its Air Force, and we'll reveal how adopting a neo-Nazi could actually help you fight hate. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. As we all know, Jared Kushner recently led a U.S. peace envoy to meet with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. And now Prime Minister Netanyahu has just scheduled a one-on-one meeting with President Trump. The Israeli leader is about to leave for a trip to South America, which will mark the first ever visit of an Israeli prime minister to Latin America. And that's before he gives an annual speech at the United Nations in September. But now it looks like he'll be squeezing in one last big meeting before he heads back to Israel. The meeting will most likely take place at one of Trump's golf courses in New Jersey. But this won't be the first face-to-face between Trump and Netanyahu. They've met twice since Trump assumed office in January. But it does come at a delicate time in the Middle East peace process, and right after Jared Kushner reportedly reopened talks of moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. The embassy move was a critical talking point and something Trump famously promised in his campaign, but then he backtracked on last June, keeping the embassy in Tel Aviv. The White House faces a difficult dilemma with a potential embassy move, and though it would appease Israel, such an act would almost certainly jeopardize negotiations with the Palestinians. Trump's administration has already been on shaky ground there, with President Abbas questioning Trump's own White House turmoil as a threat to any peace talks. Jared Kushner's in the Middle East now after meeting with both Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Clearly, he has his work cut out for him. Well, last month, another crisis was sparked when a group of Jewish settlers took control of a disputed building in the West Bank city of Hebron, right near the Holy Cave of the Patriarchs. With us in the studio for the latest update on the crisis is ILTV's Aaron Porras. Now, Aaron, what is going on with this building now?
So essentially, there's a group of settlers, there's about 100 of them, and they've illegally occupied this building for a better part of a month now. And since that time, this land is very coveted. It's right by the Cave of the Patriarchs, and Jewish groups have been trying to obtain this piece of land legally for years now. Right. When that didn't work, they moved in illegally, and now the government has found a court order to force them out and to allow the IDF to push them out by force if necessary.
Well, this wouldn't be the first time that the state has actually forced an evacuation like this, right? And is it going to look like anything that we've seen in the past?
So, I mean, you're right. It's not the first time there have been forced evacuations. A very famous example of that is, of course, the Amona settlement, right. And the first time they evacuated it. But I think the government is hoping very desperately to avoid any sort of conflict, which is why they've given the settlers a week to move out peacefully. And in fact, a month ago, when this situation first broke, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself tried to give them some time and pushed aside any forced evacuation measures. But the government has gone around him, the coalition, they've gotten a court order, and now the court, the IDF, has permission to force them at any point.
Well, let's check out more details in your report.
Negotiations between the state and the squatters have apparently hit a stalemate, and now the Israeli government is preparing to forcefully remove 100 Jewish squatters from the disputed Hebron building. The group illegally seized and occupied the building last month, sparking controversy across Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Palestinians immediately petitioned the move, arguing that the squatters lacked legal proof of ownership of the disputed property, while the Jewish group maintained that proper paperwork wasn't necessary and that the building was in fact Jewish. Unfortunately, this is an all-too-familiar story in the West Bank. Similar cases like this have been happening for years, leaving Israeli courts in the difficult position of sorting out matters from scratch. But now Israel's Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit is complying with past court precedents on the matter and giving the squatters a week to vacate or else send the army to remove them by force. Historically, these situations tend to end very tragically, and now the clock is already ticking.
All right, well, it looks like the Israeli Air Force has a few new toys to play with. The Defense Ministry has just purchased 17 brand new F-35 stealth jets, which are considered to be the most advanced fighter planes in the world. The purchase was made under former U.S. President Barack Obama's deal with Israel, which is providing a record $38 billion of American military aid to the Jewish state over the next 10 years. And the F-35 is an impressive addition to the Israeli fleet at a time when air combat is becoming more critical than ever. The additional jets will give the IAF 2 full squadrons of the advanced aircraft, replacing some of the more outdated planes in Israel's fleet and giving Israel the edge in stealth weaponry. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has praised the purchase, saying it cements further security ties between Israel and the United States. Lieberman is also facing the daily threat of a new kind of war with enemies on many fronts, placing Air Force bases and runways especially in the crosshairs of enemy rocket attacks. So these new squadrons may be just the tool Israel needs to stay one step ahead of the enemy. Here with more on the new F-35 jets that Israel is set to receive is former senior Israeli Air Force Commander Colonel Kobi Regev. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be back. Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages that these F-35s are going to have for the Israeli military.
The arrival of the F-35 represent the special relationship between Israel and the United States.
Absolutely.
It reflects the commitment of the United States to the security of Israel and to keep the quality edge of Israel against its enemies. We are the only one that received this kind of aircraft, this technology in our area.
So can you tell us a little bit about that technology and what makes these jets stand out from other jets that the Army already has or that exist just in the general market?
First of all, it's not just a jet, it's a strategic aircraft or strategic capability, because the arrival of the F-35 contribute to the deterrence of Israel against the enemies.
Right.
This is the first reason why to buy this kind of capability, which is a strategic meaning of deterrence. We know that the importance of the deterrence is that it postpones wars.
Right.
So, and we know that our enemy is really afraid and deterred from the Israeli Air Force. They don't want to be in the wrong side of the equation. So actually we bought an aircraft, but the real meaning is that the deterrence is bigger, so it means that we will be able to postpone the wars.
So speaking of those wars, I mean, what specific conflicts, or attacks do you think that Israel is trying to deter with this type of jet?
First of all, it allows Israel to operate in all of the operational environment that we face in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. You know that our area is the most dense area around the world from the air defense point of view and military capabilities, and it allows us to do the mission better with less friction. It also allows us to do special mission far away, because Israel operates sometimes not just in our border but outside,
which and we want forget,
to bring, and we want to do it in under the radar, very without friction. Mm-hmm. And this aircraft is the perfect solution for this kind of operation.
Now, as a pilot yourself, you've had experience flying planes of this sort, or jets, aircraft. Have you ever had the chance to take a look inside one of these things?
Not yet. To see, of course. To fly, no. I can tell you, I flew this simulator, and the technology is overwhelming. I don't know if you know, but just the codes, I mean, it's a 5th generation aircraft.
Right.
The technology inside is incredible. The intelligent capability of this aircraft to spot targets on the ground and to deliver an accurate bomb to destroy the target is very unique, very fast, with a lot of sensor, a lot of capability, and everything is in-house. So
that's what's so interesting. Now, what is also interesting to me is, when these jets arrive to Israel, is Israel changing them in any way, or do they just fly them as is?
No, we always do some modification, of course, with coordination with the United States. I can tell you that also our industry, defense industries, are involved in this project. IAI, the Israel Aerospace Industries, is building the wings. Elbit is building the dash helmets.
Yeah, Elbit always gets involved.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, this isn't a just as is type of scenario. Israel's certainly modifying these jets to kind of fit the needs of Israel. But again, like you said, it really is a collaboration with the United States because, you know, speaking of superior power in the air, you said that Israel is the only nation to have received these jets, correct? So what does that mean in the region? Is there any other country nearby that has anything that is near to this level?
No. But we see in the Middle East now going on an arm race, not just in the near surrounding of Israel, but also back. F-16 is very strong now in Iraq. Eurofighters going inside. Saudi Arabia is getting a new aircraft. And with this aircraft, Israel will be able to be again with superiors from many fields.
All right. Well, I think that is a very good thing for this country. Certainly, with all of
with this aircraft, we will be stronger.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me. All the best.
Well, just after Jared Kushner's visit to the Holy Land, another delegate has landed in Israel, hoping to secure Middle East peace. It's United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres, who is now in Israel for his first visit as the sitting head of the UN. He'll be meeting with leaders on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Guterres began his trip with a tour of Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial, laying a wreath and proclaiming the UN's devotion to fight anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry all over the world.
I'm fully committed to fight anti-Semitism as to fight racism, xenophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, and all other forms of bigotry that unfortunately we were not yet able to make our world free of.
This visit comes at a critical time in the peace process, which has seen shifting alliances in the Arab world and growing threats to Israel from Iran and Hezbollah. Israeli leaders are hoping Guterres' trip will open his eyes to the security situation and improve what they feel is a long history of anti-Israel bias in the United Nations. One critical issue on the table for Israel is the upcoming vote on expanding UN troops in Lebanon, which Israel believes would be critical in keeping illegal weapons out of the hands of Hezbollah. The topic was at the top of Guterres' meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. But Guterres is also facing the dire situation in Gaza, which is faced with some of the worst conditions in years under Hamas rule. The UN chief will be speaking with both Israeli and Palestinian officials in hopes of easing the humanitarian crisis there, but cannot negotiate with Hamas directly. He may, however, be able to sway Hamas by putting pressure on Qatar, which already faces its own blockade of Middle East support. After meeting with Netanyahu, Guterres travels to Ramallah to sit with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas before continuing to Gaza in the next few days. Well, hundreds of thousands of Muslim pilgrims from all over the world have just gathered in Mecca to complete their annual Hajj pilgrimage. With us now is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith to explain what this means for Israel. Now, first off, Brett, can you explain to viewers what exactly is the Hajj?
Thanks, Natasha. Well, the Hajj is the biggest religious event of the Muslim calendar, and it's also the single largest gathering of people on the planet. Now, every year, hundreds of thousands of Muslim men from all over the world make the pilgrimage to Mecca, and that's the holiest city in the Muslim faith, in a tradition that stretches all the way back to the time of Abraham. Every man in the Muslim religion is required to make the Hajj at least once in their lifetime, fulfilling one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
Well, obviously, it's quite a massive gathering and a critical part of the Muslim faith, but I wonder if this impacts Israel in any way.
Well, indirectly, the Hajj definitely does affect Israel or Israel's neighbors in any way. We've seen some intense rivalries lately in the Arab world with shifting alliances in the Palestinians as well as the Gulf states' blockade of Qatar. But when it comes to something like the Hajj, so the Saudi government actually broke its own blockade of Qatar to allow pilgrims to make the holy journey. I think that's a pretty good indication of just how powerful the Hajj is in the Muslim world, as you'll see right now in the report.
This is the Grand Mosque in Mecca, and as you can see, it's now swelling with international pilgrims from all over the world. These are the grounds of the holy site where hundreds of thousands of Muslim men have gathered to complete the Hajj, one of the 5 sacred pillars of the Islam faith. Every able Muslim man is required to complete his Hajj at least once in his lifetime and make the holy pilgrimage to perform the sacred rituals in Islam's holiest city. The black shrine at the center of the mass prayers is the Kaaba, and it's towards the walls of the Kaaba that all Muslims pray when they perform their daily prayers. For many of the participants here, some of whom came from rivaling Arab nations, the Hajj isn't just a solidarity of Muslim believers, but a beacon for unity in the split Arab world.
شعور جيد وفيه عظمة كبيرة للإسلام والمسلمين. أتمنى أن تظهر على الواقع السياسي.
The Gulf states are currently in the midst of one of its fiercest political rifts in decades, with most of the Arab nations united in blockading Qatar. Qatar has just fired back, announcing a complete restoration of ties with Iran, bringing the crisis to even greater heights. But even with things as tense as they are, the Hajj remains one of the few unifiers in the Muslim world.
Well, in a very rare decision, Israeli courts have just convicted 5 family members of the terrorist who brutally stabbed and murdered 3 Israelis in the Halamish settlement last month. They've been charged with failing to prevent the attack after knowing full well of their son's intentions and in some cases of even having incited the violence in the first place. Just a few days ago, Omar Al-Abed was convicted of murdering 3 members of the Jewish Salomon family, who were sitting down for a Shabbat dinner to celebrate the birth of a new grandchild. According to the police indictments, the terrorist left his home with a knife, illegally entered the Jewish Halamish settlement, and selected the Halamish house when he heard laughter from within. The brutal murders came at the height of some of the worst clashes between Israelis and Palestinians in years, after Israel placed metal detectors at the Temple Mount to prevent further acts of terror. But now 5 members of the Al-Abed family have just been convicted as well, in a rare move by the Israeli courts to punish the source of the terror as well. The matriarch of the family, who had posted a video to social media praising her son's actions after the murders, was given a month in prison. Her husband was sentenced to 2 months, and their 2 sons were slapped with 8 months. These sentences were handed out based on the degree of the family members' knowledge of the attacks, although the courts clearly believe that all of the family had more than enough time to report Omal's intentions and prevent the murders well in advance. Al-Abed's sentencing will be announced soon, with many calling for the death penalty. All right, whether you're part of a Fortune 500 company or a startup in your basement, you probably have documents that you prefer to keep protected. Well, one Israeli company is now offering the tools to help. Joining us in the studio to tell us more is Kfir Kimi, the CEO of It's Mine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so what does It's Mine do exactly? And I love the name, It's Mine.
Yeah. So basically what we are doing is helping companies to protect the data. We're creating a minefield inside of their organization. So it's basically, we created a new technology. We call it software mines. This is where the name came from.
Okay.
And it's basically data that is implemented inside of the organization assets, and it's data that no one should access.
So if somebody does happen to access this data, what happens?
So it depends. So the data looks like regular data of the organization.
Yeah, you think it's fine, you see it, if you're a hacker, everything seems good, and then?
And then, if they touch the data, if they try to encrypt it, trying to change it, trying to delete it, we immediately block them.
Interesting, okay.
And if it's an internal employee, which is, again, it's a very big problem in large organizations.
Right, this happens.
Exactly. So when they touch the data, we zoom into the data itself. We zoom into what they're trying to do.
Okay.
And according to it, we decide whether to block them, to educate them, or to try to understand and obtain more evidence against that employee.
Okay, so this is great. Now, how did you guys come up with this solution?
So I've been in Check Point as a security architect for more than 10 years.
Wow.
And worked with large organizations and saw the problems that companies have with protecting their data.
Right.
There are solutions. The main solution in that area is called DLP, data leakage prevention, and it's not working for companies. So this is where
So you really have created a method to kind of deal with this. And obviously private documents are not just something that companies have, individuals have them as well. So I'm sure that this technology can work for a lot of different clients as well. Right. Well, interesting. I guess a final question for you, as we have limited time, but what is the next step for the company?
So the next step as a company is to get into the US customers. We currently have 2 POCs running in the US, but we want to make it much larger. We're looking for companies that working for regulation, needs to meet with HIPAA regulation, and we know how to help them. So this is where we come in and trying to help them.
All right, well, American business owners watching, this is your man, right? All right, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Want to adopt a Nazi? Not really, right? Well, it turns out you can actually sponsor a neo-Nazi while fighting him or her at the same time. That's all thanks to one man and one organization who are trying to curb the rise in rallies that support anti-Semitism and white supremacy in the United States. It looks like their ironic initiative is really working because it's already raised $150 grand. San Francisco attorney Corey Harris noted something very disturbing a few weeks ago. Just a few days into the aftermath of Charlottesville, Virginia, which saw the tragic murder of young Heather Heyer by a Nazi sympathizer, Harris saw an alt-right group planning a mass rally right in his city of San Francisco. Alarmed to see white nationalists protesting hate under the guise of free speech, Harris had an idea. Inspired by a similar countermeasure against neo-Nazis in Germany in 2014, Harris decided to launch a fundraiser to ironically sponsor the alt-right members of the nationalist rally, and then donate the proceeds to the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that fights hate speech with activism. Harris gained the support of the Jewish Bar Association of San Francisco and launched an official GoFundMe page with a goal of $10,000. But the campaign immediately went viral, shooting past its goal within only 24 hours, and now breaking $150,000. On top of that, the alt-right rally has just been canceled by the group's organizers, who clearly see the resistance against hate speech mounting against them. This is one of dozens of white supremacy rallies all over the country that have canceled in the wake of massive calls to action against neo-Nazis and anti-Semitism. It looks like the resistance is actually working. All right, guys, now it's time for something really serious. For years, the world has been divided not by religion, not by politics, but by one crucial question. So, were Ross and Rachel on a break, or weren't they? Well, a group of passionate Israeli protesters have just taken to the streets, picketing for the case of their favorite friend, poor Ross Geller. You heard me right, nearly 100 young Israelis have just rallied in front of Tel Aviv City Hall, enraged over the fallen graces and mistreatment of Ross. As you'll all recall, Ross was put in the doghouse in a classic Friends episode after Rachel found out he'd slept with someone during an interim in their relationship. But was this cheating? Does it count if they were on a break? Well, if you ask the protesters, Ross was in the clear. The rally started off as a joke on the group's Facebook page. Organizers were then shocked to see dozens of strangers showing up with picket signs and T-shirts, making their stance on the debate crystal clear. Rachel, Rachel, be ashamed, he came out of it unscathed. Or another awesome chant, 1, 2, 3, 4, they were on a break. Well, that one rhymes better in Hebrew. An American was in town visiting her sister and actually changed her flight just to show up at that rally. So what do the protesters have in store next? Well, maybe it's time to cut Chandler some slack.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Today our Hebrew word is sheli, meaning mine, because, well, what other word would you use to finally stop your little sister from playing with your toys? Now, sheli is actually a conjunction of the word shel, meaning of or belonging to, and the suffix li, indicating oneself. But put it together and you get of or belonging to me, aka mine. Here in Israel, everybody feels like they own everything, even you. So don't be shocked if the cashier at the grocery store lovingly calls you neshama sheli, my soul, as you're checking out, or your hairdresser calls you chaim sheli, my life, as she's fixing your hair. Just remember, we're all part of one big family, right? But still, I just want to drill in the most important part of understanding what the meaning of sheli really is, and that's for our other anchor, Aaron Porras. Don't you dare touch that Hershey bar I left in the office. Ze sheli. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy with a low of 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is expected to have clearer skies, but no change in temperatures, with a high of 88 or 86 or 30 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.58 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.